There is a fear that almost everyone carries quietly, even if they rarely speak about it out loud. It is not just the fear of dying, it is the fear of disappearing. When you imagine death, what troubles you most is often not the pain, but the question that follows it. Will I still be me? Will there be someone who remembers, feels, hopes, and suffers? Or will everything simply vanish? From child, an invisible me that travels on, leaving one body to enter another. Because of this, rebirth is often understood as a journey of a soul, moving from one physical form to the next, carrying its identity intact. This belief is comforting, but it is also deeply misleading. Buddhism speaks clearly about rebirth, yet it does not teach that a soul migrates from life to life. There is no permanent self being transferred. What continues is not a someone, but a process, a flow, a continuity shaped by causes and conditions. This is where confusion often turns into fear. If there is no solid I that goes on, then what exactly continues after death? If nothing permanent survives, does that mean our lives are meaningless? Does it mean love, pain, effort, and struggle are erased? These questions are not philosophical puzzles. They come from real anxiety, from a human need to feel. Buddhism does not dismiss this fear. Instead, it invites us to look closer at it, because the truth is this: what continues after death is not less meaningful than a soul. It is more intimate, more immediate, and far more connected to how you are living right now. And understanding this changes not only how we see death, but how we live our lives today. There is a fear that almost everyone carries quietly, even if they rarely speak about it out. It is the fear of disappearing. When you imagine death, what troubles you most is often not the pain, but the question that follows it. Will I still be me? Will there be someone who remembers, feels, hopes, and suffers? Or will everything simply vanish? From childhood, many of us were taught to believe that something permanent lives inside us. A soul, a self, an invisible me that travels on, leaving. Because of this, rebirth is often understood as a journey of a soul, moving from one physical form to the next, carrying its identity intact. This belief is comforting, but it is also deeply misleading. Buddhism speaks clearly about rebirth, yet it does not teach that a soul migrates from life to life. There is no permanent self being transferred, no fixed identity making the journey forward. What continues is not a someone, but a continuity shaped by causes and conditions. This is where confusion often turns into fear. If there is no solid I that goes on, then what exactly continues after death? If nothing permanent survives, does that mean our lives are meaningless? Does it mean love, pain, effort, and struggle are erased? These questions are not philosophical puzzles. They come from real anxiety, from a human need to feel that our existence matters. Buddhism, instead, it invites us to look closer at it, because the truth is this: what continues after death is not less meaningful than a soul. It is more intimate, more immediate, and far more connected to how you are living right now. And understanding this changes not only how we see death, but how we live our lives today. In Buddhism, rebirth is described by the word punabhava, which simply, but the meaning is very different. Rebirth is not about something leaving the body at death and traveling elsewhere. There is no hidden passenger escaping the body, no soul stepping out and moving on. When the body ends, nothing permanent departs from it. Instead, rebirth is the continuation of a process. Think of it like a flame lighting another candle. The flame continues, but it is not the same flame. Nothing solid. What continues is a pattern, a momentum, a flow, shaped by what came before. In Buddhism, this flow is made of experiences, intentions, habits, emotional tendencies, and mental patterns. These do not belong to a fixed self. They arise, pass away, and condition what comes next. Life does not restart from zero. It continues from conditions already. If there is no soul, no permanent me, then why are lives different from one another? Why is one life marked by ease, another by struggle? Why does experience not reset completely at death? The answer is not found in a traveling identity, but in continuity without ownership. What shapes the next life is not who you are, but how the flow has been shaped. Intentions matter. Rebirth, then, is not about preserving an identity. It is about the continuation of causes. And that means what you are cultivating right now is already shaping what comes next. To understand rebirth, Buddhism asks us to look beyond isolated events and see the larger pattern. This pattern is called paticcasamuppada, or dependent origination. In simple terms, it means this: nothing exists by itself, and once it arises, it becomes a condition for something else. Life unfolds not as a straight line, but as a web. Imagine a spider's web stretched across a wide space. Touch one thread, and the entire web responds. Even a small movement sends vibrations throughout the whole structure. Human experience works the same way. A single, careless word may seem insignificant in the moment, yet it can echo for years in another person's mind. A repeated negative thought, barely noticed at first, can slowly shape an entire outlook on life. What feels small now can grow powerful over time. This is not meant to create guilt. It is meant to reveal connection. Many people feel alone in their suffering, believing their pain is isolated and meaningless. Buddhism offers a different view. You are not alone, because nothing happens in isolation. Your experiences are connected to countless conditions, but you are also not powerless. Because if everything arises from conditions, then changing conditions matters. Awareness matters. Intention matters. Even a small shift can change the direction of the flow. Dependent origination teaches responsibility without blame. It shows us that life is not random, but it is also not fixed. And within this web of causes, rebirth is not an accident. It is the natural continuation of the patterns we help create. When we say I, it feels obvious. We assume there is a stable center inside us that thinks, feels, decides, and endures. Buddhism invites us to look more closely. What we call I is described as citta santana, the stream of consciousness. This stream is not a thing, it is a process. Within it, there is the basic awareness of mind, the mental factors that color experience, such as emotions and intentions. And the moment, but none of them stay the same from one moment to the next. A helpful image is a wave in the ocean. The wave has a clear shape. You can point to it and name it, yet it has no independent substance. It is made entirely of moving water. When conditions change, the wave changes. When conditions end, the wave disappears, without anything permanent being lost. Our sense of self is similar. The suffering begins when we cling to we defend it, compare it, fear its loss. We build our lives around protecting an image of who we think we are. This attachment creates tension, anxiety, and fear of death. Buddhism does not deny experience. It does not say nothing exists. It says that what exists is dynamic, conditioned, and constantly changing. The pain comes not from change itself, but from resisting it. When we loosen our grip on an imagined permanent I, something more space to respond rather than react. Understanding the stream of consciousness is not about losing yourself. It is about realizing you were never as fixed as you believed. And in that realization, suffering begins to soften. Few ideas are more misunderstood than karma. Many people hear the word and immediately think of reward and punishment. Good actions earn rewards. Bad actions bring suffering. Life becomes a cosmic courtroom. And this is not how Buddhism understands karma. Karma is not a system of punishment. It does not operate with anger, justice, or favoritism. Karma is simply the natural imprint left by intention. Every intentional thought, word, and action leaves a subtle mark on the stream of consciousness. Over time, these marks form patterns. Karma is habit. If someone repeatedly reacts with irritation, criticism, or resentment, the mind slowly learns to return to those states. Life begins to feel heavy, even when circumstances are not especially difficult. The person may say, "Nothing ever goes right for me," without realizing how deeply their own mental habits shape their experience. This is not about blame. It is about recognition. Most of us have suffered not because the world was cruel, but because we unknowingly trained our minds toward tension, fear, or dissatisfaction. We replay old grievances. We expect disappointment. We speak harshly to ourselves in ways we would never speak to others. Karma works quietly, not dramatically. It builds momentum through repetition. And because it feels familiar, we often mistake it for personality or fate. Understanding karma in this way can be uncomfortable. It means suffering is not random, but it also means suffering is not permanent. Because if karma is habit, then habit can change. And the moment we see how intention shapes experience, it becomes information, a mirror, a chance to understand how we may have been hurting ourselves without ever meaning to. There is a quiet turning point that happens when someone begins to truly understand karma. It is not dramatic. There is no sudden awakening or mystical experience. It begins with observation. A person starts to notice their words before they speak them, their thoughts before they follow them, their emotional reactions before they harden into habits. This moment is powerful because it returns choice. Transformation in Buddhism does not require extreme practices or withdrawal from life. You do not need to become someone else. You do not need to escape the world. What matters is intention. When intention shifts, the direction of the stream shifts. A small pause before reacting with anger changes the tone of a conversation. A moment of kindness toward oneself softens the inner landscape. Repeated over time, these small changes begin to recondition the mind. The old momentum weakens. New patterns slowly take root. This is how karma transforms. It does not erase the past, but it stops blindly repeating it. The future is no longer a mechanical extension of old habits. It becomes responsive. This understanding carries deep hope. If rebirth is the continuation of conditioned the direction of rebirth is not fixed at death. It is being shaped moment by moment in this very life. Every mindful choice, every compassionate intention, slightly alters the flow. You may not see the result immediately, but the stream responds. And in this way, Buddhism offers something both realistic and liberating. You are not trapped by who you have been. The movement of your life can change. Among all Buddhist teachings, anatta, or no self, is often the most difficult to accept, not because it is complex, but because it touches a deep emotional nerve. We are attached to the idea of me, my story, my pain, my future. So when we hear that there is no fixed self, fear naturally arises. If there is no permanent I, it says the way you exist is not what you assume. The self we cling to is like a mirage. From a distance, it looks solid and real. We organize our lives around it, but when we examine it closely, it dissolves into changing thoughts, emotions, memories, and roles. None of these remain the same for long. None of them can be owned permanently. The fear is understandable. Losing the idea of a solid self, because there is no fixed I. You are not trapped. You are not limited to a single identity. You are not condemned by past mistakes or rigid labels. If the self were permanent, growth would be impossible. Freedom would be impossible. Change would threaten existence itself. Anatta does not erase meaning. It removes the weight we place on an imagined center. When we stop defending a fragile identity, there is space to breathe. Less fear of loss. No self is not emptiness. It is openness. And in that openness, compassion becomes easier, because there is less separation between me and others. What once felt frightening begins to feel liberating. Rebirth is often imagined as something distant, something that happens after death. Buddhism invites us to notice something closer. Rebirth is happening now. Every moment, a thought arises and passes away. A feeling appears, lingers briefly, and Each time this happens, the mind is slightly renewed. What you experience in the next moment is not identical to the one before it. This is rebirth on a small scale. When anger arises and dissolves, the mind is reborn without anger. When a moment of kindness appears, a different quality of mind takes its place. These shifts are subtle, but they are real. They show us directly how experience continues. Mindfulness and meditation are tools for seeing this process clearly. They are not about believing doctrines or accepting ideas on faith. They are about observation. When you sit quietly and watch the mind, you see change happening on its own. Thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fall. Nothing stays fixed. Nothing needs to be forced. This direct seeing is essential. Buddhism does not ask you to believe to see how intention shapes the next moment. Through mindfulness, rebirth becomes understandable, not mysterious. By learning to observe experience as it unfolds, fear slowly loosens. Death no longer feels like an absolute break. It begins to look like a continuation of a process you already know. And with this understanding, practice becomes grounded, practical, and deeply relevant to everyday life. Across cultures and centuries, many spiritual traditions have reflected on what happens after death. The idea that life continues beyond a single lifetime appears again and again, often expressed through the concept of reincarnation. In early Hindu thought, this continuity is explained through Atman. Atman is understood as an eternal essence, the true self that does not change. Reincarnation, in this view, is the movement of this inner self from one body to another. Life after life, Atman continues its journey, shaped by actions and understanding, until liberation is reached. Ancient Greek philosophy also explored the idea of an enduring soul. Thinkers such as Plato described the soul as separate from the body and capable of existing before and after physical life. For him, repeated lives were opportunities for the soul to purify itself and return to a state of higher truth through wisdom and reason. In Sikhism, a similar idea appears through Atma, often described as a spark of the divine. Atma moves through cycles of birth and death, influenced by one's actions, until it reunites with the divine through devotion, ethical living, and remembrance. Despite their differences, these traditions share a common foundation: the belief in something permanent that survives death. A core self continues, travels, and seeks eventual. It simply points in a different direction. The difference lies not in whether continuity exists, but in what is believed to continue. And this difference quietly reshapes how suffering, freedom, and meaning are understood. The distinction between rebirth and reincarnation may seem subtle at first, but it leads to profoundly different ways of understanding life. In traditions centered on reincarnation, the focus is often on saving or purifying a soul. The self is seen as real, enduring, and in need of release from suffering. Spiritual practice becomes a journey of perfecting this inner essence until it reaches a final destination. Buddhism takes another path. Instead of preserving a permanent self, it questions whether such a self truly exists. Rather than rescuing an identity, it invites us to examine the belief in identity itself. Suffering, from this perspective, does not come from the soul's imprisonment, but from clinging to the idea of I and mine. This difference matters deeply on a personal level. Many people live with constant anxiety about loss of youth, loss of status, loss of meaning. Beneath these fears is the belief that there is a solid me that can be damaged or destroyed. The tighter we hold this belief, the more fragile life feels. Buddhism suggests that freedom does not come from protecting the self, but from seeing through it. When there is no fixed I to defend, fear softens. Change becomes less threatening. Even death begins to look different. This is not a rejection of responsibility or compassion. On the contrary, it deepens them. Without a rigid self, actions still matter, but they are no longer driven by fear of annihilation or obsession with survival. The path shifts from saving a self to understanding experience, and in that shift, many discover a quieter, more stable kind of peace. Death is often imagined as a moment of departure, as if something inside us packs up and leaves the body. Buddhism describes death differently. At the end of life, the final moment of consciousness, known as Bodhisattva, arises and passes away. This is not a soul exiting the body. It is simply the last moment. When the conditions supporting that stream end, it dissolves. What follows is Bodhisattva, the linking consciousness. This moment marks the beginning of a new stream, shaped by the conditions left behind. Nothing travels, nothing jumps from one body to another. There is continuity without transfer. This may sound abstract, but its emotional impact is very human. Many people fear death because they imagine complete erasure or painful separation. Buddhism offers death is not a collapse into nothingness, nor is it a journey of a soul. It is a transition, guided by patterns already in motion. Understanding this does not eliminate grief or sadness. It softens panic. It removes the image of something precious being torn away. What ends is a particular configuration of conditions. What continues is the momentum shaped by intention. This perspective gently loosens fear. If life is a flow rather than a possession, it is a change in form. And how that change unfolds is not determined at the final moment, but by how the flow has been shaped over time. Seen this way, death becomes less mysterious, and life becomes more meaningful because what we cultivate now truly matters. When Buddhism speaks of different realms of existence, many people imagine distant worlds somewhere beyond this life. But these realms are not best understood as locations. They are states of mind. Traditionally, these realms are grouped into three categories. The first is the realm of sense desire, where experience is driven by craving, pleasure, fear, and survival. This includes human life, but also states of deep suffering and intense desire. The second is the realm of form, where the mind is more refined, calmer, and less bound to sensory craving. The third is the formless realm, where experience becomes. These realms reflect how the mind relates to experience. A mind consumed by anger, fear, or obsession can feel like a hell, even while living an ordinary life. A mind driven by endless wanting is never satisfied, no matter how much it gains. On the other hand, moments of clarity, kindness, and calm can feel expansive and light, almost heavenly. Seen this way, heaven and hell are not only future possibilities. We are not assigned to a realm by chance or judgment. Our mental tendencies shape where experience settles. Karma operates psychologically, moment by moment, long before death. Recognizing this gives responsibility without despair. If states of suffering and peace arise from the mind, then change is possible here and now. We are not merely waiting for another life. We are already living within the realms we cultivate. Loss is one of the deepest human fears. We fear losing people we love, losing health, losing meaning, and ultimately losing life itself. Beneath these fears lies resistance to impermanence. Buddhism does not deny this pain. It asks us to look at it honestly. Everything that arises will change. This is not a punishment, it is the nature of experience. Death, in this view, is not an interruption of life, but part of its continuous movement. It is when impermanence is misunderstood, life feels fragile and unfair. We cling harder, hoping to hold things still. Ironically, this clinging intensifies suffering. But when impermanence is understood, something softens. Knowing that nothing can be owned permanently encourages gentleness. We become more careful with one another, less arrogant, more forgiving. We begin to value presence over possession. When we accept change, we listen more deeply. We argue less. We forgive sooner. It allows us to live more lightly, loving without fear of ownership, and letting go without despair. Throughout his teachings, Gautama Buddha consistently redirected attention away from speculation and toward lived experience. He did not encourage endless debate about the universe, the afterlife, or metaphysical theories. He asked a simpler, more demanding question: does this reduce suffering? The Buddha's concern was never abstract belief. It was freedom. Rather than asking people to fear future lives or chase perfect rebirths, he emphasized how we live right now, how we speak, how we act, how we relate to our own minds. Ethical conduct, mindfulness, and wisdom were not rules imposed from outside. They were tools for clarity. Speculation about what happens after death can become another form of escape. It can distract from the work of understanding suffering as it appears in daily life. The Buddha gently set those distractions aside and returned to what could be known directly. This is where the teaching becomes deeply human. Most people are not searching for cosmic answers. They are searching for relief from anxiety, anger, regret, and restlessness. They want peace, not in some distant future, but here, in the middle of ordinary life. The path offered is practical. Pay attention. Act with care. Notice how craving tightens the mind and how letting go brings ease. Cultivate compassion, not because it earns rewards, but because it reduces harm. Rebirth, karma, and no self all point back to this moment. They remind us that experience is shaped now, not later. That freedom is not postponed. The Buddha's invitation was never to become someone else in another life. It was to become more awake in this one. And in that awakening, many discover the peace they were searching for all along. When rebirth is misunderstood, it becomes a source of fear. People imagine endless cycles they cannot escape, futures they cannot control, and identities they might lose. But Buddhism offers a very different invitation. Rebirth is not a threat. It is a mirror. It shows us that life is not frozen, not owned, and not predetermined. What continues is not a self that must be protected, but a flow that responds to conditions, and those conditions are being shaped, quietly and constantly, in each moment. This understanding does not ask us to worry about distant lives or unknown realms. It brings attention back to what is immediate: how we speak when we are tired, how we think when we are hurt, how we act when no one is watching. The stream of consciousness does not wait until death to change direction. It shifts now, with every intention, with every moment of awareness, with every choice to respond rather than react. Seen this way, rebirth becomes empowering. It reminds us that nothing is wasted and nothing is fixed. Even small changes matter. Even brief moments of clarity leave a trace. There is no final conclusion to hold on to, no rigid belief to defend, only an ongoing invitation to observe, to soften, and to understand. Perhaps the most important question is no longer what happens after death, but what is happening right now. And in that question, each listener is free to pause, reflect, and continue the inquiry for themselves.